my brave, bold, beautiful creatives. This is Mel from Create and Company, where we create more and in more flow together. So, setting the timer, let's get into the second section of The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. So, the first page of this section had a short poem type of, it looked like a poem. And I really liked it because it said, turning something from an idea into a reality can make it seem smaller. It changes from unearthly to earthly. The imagination has no limits. The physical world does. The work exists in both. So for all of you who are big fans of complementarity, is that a word? Like the yin, the yang, the feminine, the masculine, the day, the night, the light, the dark. This has that tasty balance and coexistence between the unlimited and the limited, the eternal and the mortal. And I found a lot of power in this short excerpt because as somebody who is fascinated by why we as humans sometimes procrastinate on the very project we are so passionate about. Raise your hand if you're creative with a project that has been taking longer than you want it to, or you've been avoiding it, and at the same time it's calling you. Since that's a part of my job to help people break through those blocks, this gave me a lot of understanding and compassion as to why often as humans we say, I don't really want to do it because in a way, okay, like we want to do it, but the excuse we use is often like, if I did it, it would be like not good enough because the idea we have in the imagination, like he says, has no limits. Like when you go to sleep and you dream, especially if you're a lucid dreamer, like I've gotten into, you can do anything you want. There are no physical world consequences or limits, right? We can do what we seem to not be able to do in this waking life. So sometimes that can be seductive to think, I want my creative idea to stay idea. The metaphor that's coming to me is like if you have children and you want them to stay babies or toddlers forever because of how cute they are in that phase. And yet that would be blocking their whole development, their whole process, their whole life. And things evolve, things change, and things have limits. So as a dance teacher of mine was telling me yesterday, there can be so much freedom within limits for a creative. Often we think that we want 100% freedom from the very start. And in summary, often that can become messier than if we have some limits to work within. And then within those limits, there's more focus, there's more. What do you guys think? Comment below. What do you feel about your creative ideas when they're in the imaginative state? And then when you start to put them on paper metaphorically, do they feel smaller? Do they feel more earthly? Does that dissuade you a bit? Does that make you feel a little sad that it's not as big as in your imagination? Or do you get excited because now it's more tangible? We don't always have to agree with the authors we read. This is opening conversation, reflection, and action is my goal, that we all act more on our creativity thanks to journeying this book. So for those of you who are curious, that excerpt is on page 17 of the physical copy, and it talks about how the work exists in both. It's not one or the other, it's the unlimited, then getting into a limited earthly form. I really enjoyed that reminder. Okay, the next piece is called awareness. Boom. And here he says that awareness allows something to reveal itself more. And he talked about a flower. And when you observe a flower, it's like it blossoms, it reveals itself more. Yesterday, we talked about the eternal creative unfolding, and I commented on how it's cool because an unfolding already has all the pieces within it. It's just simply showing itself to you in a new way as it changes the form of those pieces. And here, I thought on page, I think that was on page 20. Yeah, on page 20, it says, through detached noticing, Awareness allows an observed flower to reveal more of itself without our intervention. This is true of all things, he says. So how cool that you don't have to intervene, you don't even have to speak or act, your awareness, your attention. Some schools of thought believe that awareness is God. Neville Goddard, if anyone studies him, believes that our awareness is our superpower. It is God, it is love. Where are you putting your awareness? In this second, you're putting it on this video, so thank you. We are connected through awareness. Through detached noticing, awareness allows an observed flower to reveal more of itself. Why did I love this piece? Because before this, I was falling into the belief that a flower is going to bloom whether you're there or not. And then here we have more of the magic, the bond between the observer and the observed. And this goes really deep in science, the observer effect. If any of you want to go deeper down that, research that, like lots of scientific studies change because of how they are observed. Something to consider, the power of your awareness. And this whole mini chapter is about awareness. So let's keep going. Rick Rubin says, awareness is not a state you force. So let that sink in. You don't force it. There is there is little effort involved, though persistence is key. So the way he's speaking right now is very Yoda to me. It's like, da-da-da, though this. There is no try, only do. So like, I think this portion specifically has that Yoda feeling, like he knows so much and he's taking us slowly and surely through this path. So no effort, no force, and yet persistence. So, okay, metaphors, as you get to know me, you'll learn I work with metaphors. So think of it this way, like water and stone. At first we think that stone is harder than water, right? Like if a giant stone falls into a river, it's going to stay there, a giant stone. Like maybe the water can't push that stone. It'll displace the water. A stone can like hurt a body more than some water splashing on it, right? So in lots of ways, we originally think the stone is stronger in force in a lot of ways than water. And check this out. There's a contrast though. Have you ever seen these videos? There's these cool like shrines in Asia where they have a drop of water over like many decades that's dropping on a stone, and it's carving that stone. It is making a hole in that otherwise very strong stone. And why? Because it is a persistent drop. Has anyone ever had a persistent drop at night? Keep them up because it's doing an echo in the kitchen maybe, or it's creating a giant, I know I've had this in the bottom of my bathroom. There's been like a lot of humidity sometimes and mold, and it's just because one little drop added up, and then before you knew it, that happened. So anyway, drops of water can be persistent. It's something you actively allow to happen. Ooh, this still fits the water analogy because water, gravity is taking it down. It's being allowed to happen. It's not forced. It's something you actively allow to happen. I like that duo of actively allow. It's not passively allow, it's actively allow. It is a presence with an acceptance of what is happening in the eternal now. One more time. It is a presence with and an acceptance of what is happening in the eternal now. For all of you Eckhart Tolle fans who have read The Power of Now, which I have reread a few times, I am a huge fan of that book. This is sounding very Power of Now-ish. Okay. So now he goes on to say that though we can't change what it is that we are noticing, we can change our ability to notice. Okay, remember how yesterday we talked about fine-tuning and tuning in? Now this is talking more about our ability to notice, not what we notice, our ability to notice. We can expand our awareness and narrow it, experience it with our eyes open or closed. Now here is a part I put a sticky on this one. I think you guys will like this one because as someone who meditates a lot, I often have quieted my inside And yet here he gave me another one of those duo dichotomies I was talking about earlier, like the yin yang. He gave me two options that both work beautifully. Check this out. We can quiet our inside so we can perceive more on the outside, or quiet the outside so we can notice more what's happening on the inside. Did you guys catch that? Like, I don't know if you live in a quiet place or a loud place. Comment below. Do you live in a loud city? Do you live in a super quiet, far away, naturey corner somewhere? If you do, good on you that you're connecting to internet right now. Either way, like, where do you live? Is it quiet inside? Is it quiet in your town? Is it quiet on your street? Is it quiet at your home? Maybe you live in a very quiet town, but then you have a toddler and the toddler's loud at home, or there's construction going on. Who knows? I'm curious. Do you live in a loud or quiet place? Why am I curious? Because I happen to live like on a pretty loud street. And so I meditate a lot. And I notice that when I meditate, I can hear the outside way differently. So I confirm what Rick Rubin's saying here about our perception and how we have those two beautiful options. Either quiet the outside to hear the inside, or quiet the inside to hear the outside differently. How cool is that? That we have those options. And maybe in the chat, tell me how you quiet your insides or how you quiet your outsides. I definitely use meditation, earplugs I've talked about before to my community go a long way. And even doing silent retreats, I have done those. Okay, check this out. The universe is only as large as our perception of it. When we cultivate our awareness, we are expanding the universe. So here he just took us way up and he gave us the idea that this isn't just to be artists, to be creative, to take in material, to create cool art. This is a little bigger than that, he says. We're expanding the universe. And this phrase reminds me of a lot of teachings that remind you that, like, when you change your thinking, you change your world. When you expand your mind, you expand your world. Like, your life can only go as far as you've let yourself believe for yourself and others. So pretty deep stuff here. And I'll read the last sentence of this portion. He says, this expands the scope, not just of the material at our disposal to create from, but the life we get to live. So what I like so far about what he's feeding us is, I feel he's making the creative life way more attractive, because now it's not just for the fulfillment of getting your book out, finishing the painting collection, putting the play on the stage, etc. Now it's like, whoa, my whole life can be expanded and the whole universe can be expanded. I will read on. I will read on. They call this like a hook, I think sometimes in books, like the intro hooks you in. I think he did that. I believe he did that because we're doing a lot more than just the creative project or the creative hobby or whatever thing we're creating or we think we're creating. This is inviting us to consider that the way we perceive, the way we are aware, the way we see, the way we intake, it's all expanding our lives and the entire universe. Okay, so there's a little piece here about how the ability to look deeply is the root of creativity, to see past the ordinary and the mundane, to get to what might otherwise be invisible. That reminds me, I saw a beautiful video on Vimeo yesterday, a short documentary called Echo, and it was about how people who are blind from their eyes, I'm saying that, you'll see why in a second, like eye blind, they use echolocation to see. So they click with their mouths, and then depending on the echoes they get back, they can start to graph and understand their surroundings. And they showed these blind by eye people skateboarding, riding their bikes. How cool is that? So they were able to see what was invisible. If you guys haven't seen that, go check it out, Echo, on Vimeo. So here it's saying that our ability to look deeply is the root of creativity. Remember yesterday's session, we talked about the ability to pay attention is key to being creative as well. So I see parallels between pay attention, look deeply. Okay, next mini chapter, we're almost done. It's called The Vessel and the Filter. the vessel and the filter. Each of us has a container within. It is constantly being filled with data. It holds the sum total of our thoughts, our feelings, our dreams, and experiences in the world. Let's call this the vessel. Information does not enter the vessel directly, like rain filling into a barrel. It is filtered in a unique way for each of us. Not everything makes it through this filter, and what does get through doesn't always do so faithfully. We each have our own method of reducing source. We each have our own method of reducing source. Our memory space is limited. Our senses often misperceive data, and our minds don't have the processing power to take it all that information in. Our senses would be overwhelmed by light and color and sound and smell. That reminds me of when I've seen documentaries of people who have had like a brain injury or brain surgery, people after crashes, or people who certain medications have negative effects or have side effects, and then they can't even balance because they can't read their senses well. And yeah, I have heard that people who would intake all the senses without the filter, it's overwhelming. So it says we would not be able to distinguish one object from another. So imagine you don't know like where the window ends, where the floor is, or you go to grab your pen and you can't really get it from the table. Curious to think about, just because often we can take for granted the filtering and the decision-making our senses and our processing does. So putting that out there. Does anyone else feel like this sounds like a computer? Because he's talking about our memory space is limited. He's talking about how we have processing power. I mean, chicken egg, I don't know which came first because the computer was modeled after a lot of brain activities and stuff like that. And I just think this sounds a lot like a computer because not every computer is the same. So that was the metaphor I was thinking of. Like we have computers that take in like and show colors differently for designers. Then we have computers that are like doing a lot of math for like maybe stocks or like quick calculations. Then we have computers that can run a lot of video games. So throwing out there that there are different computers with different filters, different capacities, different uses, and yes. Now, this was my favorite part of this section. It said, as artists, we seek to restore our childlike perception. As artists, we seek to restore, even the word restore is very computer used, right? Like restore alt, control alt delete. But anyway, that might be what we're doing here. We're rebooting and we are restoring our childlike perception, a more innocent state of wonder and appreciation, not tethered to utility or survival. I feel he said this very clearly. I find he said this very clearly. A more innocent state of wonder and appreciation, not tethered to utility or survival. So as a kid, it was like, we didn't know that by, you know how you tightrope walk on like interesting parts of the landscape, and we didn't know that if we fell, we'd hurt ourselves, or, monkey bars, or putting something into our mouth, or smelling something, or like it was curiosity. And granted, our parents were guiding us, in a lot of cases, parents or guardians or someone that was an adult was helping us to be safe and to survive. And yet that responsibility was taken off of us to make sure like everything we did was just useful and for survival. And so I like that here we are being encouraged to tap back into the appreciation and the curiosity without the end calculation that we put it through the math of like, how is this going to help me? Where is this taking me? Is this safe or not? What are the statistics? Like very limited. Instead of that, we're in that present moment. We're innocent, we're wondering, we're appreciating. And then check this out. He says, as artists, we want to hold our stories softly and find space for the vast amount of information that doesn't fit easily within the limits of our belief system. So I feel like not only is he telling us to be curious and wonder and not worry so much about utility and survival, but now he says that the way to do this is when we take in new information, and this can be your to-do for today, when you take in this new information, observation, don't think, okay, what drawer in my brain am I going to put this in? Or where does this fit? Or how does this fit with what I already believe? Instead, hold your old stories softly and let that which doesn't fit come in. In a world where we become so polarized and it's like, you're the right, I'm the left, you're blue, I'm red, you're, I don't know, like you're a hippie and I'm responsible. Like there's so many people that like to box and decide where they stand, where other people stand, what is right, like, and this is telling us, actually try to not be so predictable with what you're going to take in and where you're going to store it and what you're going to decide it means. Instead, he says the more raw data we can take in and the less we shape it, the closer we get to nature. Okay? So this seems like a cool task. How about you apply it today? When you listen to this video, notice anything that you bring into your mind or your life. Are you not even letting it in because it doesn't fit with you? Or are you putting it in and then just like pre-deciding? Are you pre-deciding? Are you holding your old stories super tight? Because I found times in my life when I most grew and I felt free and everything was like most flowing in my life is when I decided to be open. Like that word open was my guiding word for a long time. And it's just that I was open. Open means like, I'm open to new ideas. I'm open to new ways of doing things. I'm open to new people. I'm open to being wrong. I'm open to what's coming in. So I see some parallels here because he says that he recommends to let more raw data in, don't shape it as much. And I would say the more open-minded you are, the more you let that raw data in and the less you're about to shape it. Because if you're open, you're letting it maybe shape you. Okay, now we're going to end this piece by saying how he summarized here he has one summary of what the creative act is. He says, one can think of the creative act as taking the sum of our vessel's components as potential material, selecting for elements that seem useful or significant in the moment, and representing them. So here he did say what's useful, even though earlier he said to steer away from utility. So Rick, if you're watching this, what did you mean there? Maybe this is a new kind of useful. Maybe it's utility means like what society deems as useful. And here, maybe it's your new criteria paradigm of useful. Okay, so then he says, this is source drawn through us and made into books and movies and buildings, paintings, meals, businesses, whatever projects we embark on. If we choose to share that, which we make, our work can recirculate and become source material for others. So that's cool. It's that like infinite chain of like, we take source material, we create, other people take what we created, that's their source material. It is helpful to know this default system can be bypassed. Okay, this was interesting, right? Because at first, you know how I was like, wait, utility, like, aren't you saying we shouldn't just do that? And then he ends with saying that default system can be bypassed. With training, we can improve our interface with source and radically expand the vessel's ability to receive. So let this be our goal. Let's plant that seed that we want to expand our vessel's ability to receive. Changing the instrument is not always the easiest way to change the sound of the music, but it can be the most powerful. Ooh, for all of you that actually play a physical instrument, tuning and changing the instrument, maybe sharpening the pencil if you're drawing. It is helpful to know this default system can be bypassed. With training, we can improve our interface with source and radically expand the vessel's ability to receive. Changing the instrument is not always the easiest way to change the sound of music, but it can be the most powerful. And we are done. Well, no, we're not done. There's one more thing on the last page before. Yeah, page 29 says, no matter what tools you use to create, the true instrument is you. And through you, the universe that surrounds us all comes into focus. Cool. So you are the truest instrument And that instrument can be changed and tuned to take in more. To take in more and therefore help in the expansion of the universe. Very beautifully written. I will see you tomorrow for the next section. And email me if you have any comments, questions, additions. createincompany@gmail.com.